sign said the words of the prophets are written on the subway wall.
Hi, this is Shuffling Notes. This is a channel where we just love talking about music because we love music. And this episode, I would like to, firstly tell you I am your co-host Razi,
And I'm your co-host Prankit.
and I would then start the episode with a quote by Don McLean, even though, let's get him. So his quote says, my expectations for myself were never high. I had a very unusual way of writing songs and of thinking about music. I wasn't at all like Bob Dylan or Simon and Garfunkel. I was completely different. I didn't have a David Geffen at my side. Um, just just taking away what Don McLean gave us in words is Simon and Garfunkel is something that stood out for him, and Simon and Garfunkel is something that stood out for us. So this week we will dive into Simon and Garfunkel's debut album, debut studio album, I think, called Wednesday Morning 3 a.m. And yeah, so this was released in 1964, and it's just to put it in the fewest words possible, I can say that it's it's such a perfect kind of uh, way to express times of war, right? Um, and it just because every song has a very unique zone to it. But before we get into that, let's just get into a little bit of history. So this perfect duo, as I would say, was a Jewish duo. They first went by the name Tom and Jerry. Did you know that?
Yeah, their stage names.
And that was that's nostalgic for us
Mhm.
90s kids, and it's just
Yeah.
funny to actually picture all the songs that we've heard of Simon and Garfunkel to come
Hmm.
from someone named Tom and Jerry,
Yeah.
being Tom and Jerry, the famous Tom and Jerry. And yeah, so this album, it was very much influenced by Bob Dylan's poetry and acoustics, etc. Like Bob Dylan's music, let's say. And yeah, it's just like a first impression. It's at the time in 1964, the first impressions of the album were so bad that they broke the duo up.
Well, it just didn't
And
take off. I think they when they
yeah,
released it, I think they were expecting it to be a bigger hit. Um, but then there
it got
was
it got really bad reviews
yeah,
because there were, I mean, Bob Dylan was already in, well, in everyone's head, singing his
yeah,
ways, his words, his
Mhm.
way. And this adding on to it, I mean, it's very unique, but
Yeah,
that was realized, I think, a year later in the re-release of the album with Sounds of
yeah.
Silence being the
I
Sounds of
mean,
Silence that
yeah.
we know of.
Yeah, I mean, there was also, the time at which this album came out. There was the what you call the British invasion of music. So a lot of these
Hmm.
British bands
Hmm.
like Pink Floyd and the Who, like we talk about, and Rolling Stones, all of these big bands, they were really sort of making an impact on sort of American music. And I think
Yeah,
somewhere they're sort of, even though they have a unique sound, it kind of got lost because there wasn't a lot of attention to this type of like folk rock music. A lot of the attention was going more towards
that's right.
hard rock and roll in that area. So I think like the timing and everything, it didn't really align as well as they thought it would.
Yeah, and I guess it was just, I mean, people didn't realize the value of the words until, because I guess nobody really went deep into the music because it was just acoustics and everyone
Mm-hmm.
had been hearing a lot of acoustics at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And this being just an addition, and maybe like there are such nuances that can be taken out from the music itself, which connected to the the purest form of folk rock.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's one word that I learned from this. It's zeitgeist. So
Yeah, yeah.
did you get to
Yeah,
like did
but
you
it's
get
pronounced
to read that somewhere?
no, so it's pronounced
Zeit,
Zitgeist.
Zeit,
Yeah, yeah. You
Zeitgeist. Yeah.
confused me now, but yeah. It's I think it's Zitgeist is how it's
So
pronounced.
I mean, I've just written it down
Yeah,
so I remember it. But
yeah.
so it just means it's German philosophy. So
Mm,
it means spirit of the age,
yeah. Sort of
and
embedded in the memory
that's
of that era. Zeitgeist. That's how
and
it's pronounced. Yeah, Zeitgeist.
zeitgeist.
Yeah,
Uh, thank
it's
you.
embedded in the zeitgeist is like how you say, right?
So yeah, and I completely agree with that being a say a review of Simon and Garfunkel, like the early age Simon and Garfunkel coming
Mm,
in, and those few people who realized it at the time when
mm-hmm.
I think a year later the producer, his
Yeah,
name was Tom Wilson.
yeah.
He just went through Sound of Silence again, and he
Redubbed it
was
with the
like, let's add some
electrics. Yeah,
electric and drums, and
yeah.
the one I think most of us sort of got
The
introduced to
version
Simon and
of Sound of
Garfunkel. Yeah,
Silence that is the one that most people have heard is the redubbed version. It
I
was,
remember.
interesting. I think because what happened was the original the Sound of Silence, it did start picking up radio play, and I think that's when the producer
Mhm.
realized there's an opportunity there to make this more mainstream, a bit more of a radio song, and then he just went in and sort of redubbed it and released it, and that was a big hit. And unbeknownst to Simon and Garfunkel didn't know that the producer is actually doing
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
but it seems to have worked out. Um,
And so yeah, they got back together right
yeah,
after
they recorded the
they
second
became
album.
the number one throughout I
Hmm.
think US and UK charts.
Did quite well.
Yeah, I mean, I've written something down about it.
Yeah,
Like, so Dylan's "Blowing in the Wind" was, raging. Tambourine Man was raging, and this sort of, you know, the words being as deep as the sounds of silence. You can just keep thinking of the sound of silence, but you can't really get to a point. But they sort of made it.
yeah.
So it's really fascinating, I would say. And yeah, so do you have anything to add before we jump into the backlist?
Yeah, well, I just add a bit more context as well. The album when it was conceived, it was supposed to be I think 6 original songs and 6 cover songs.
Mhm.
But then it ended up being I think 5 original songs, 3 sort of traditional folk songs, and then like 4 cover or like folk
Yeah.
inspired songs. So it's an interesting mix of like original as well as covers or just recording
Mhm.
folk songs in their own sort of way, putting their own twist on it. So it's quite an interesting
Do you know
album from
which
that
songs?
perspective. Yeah, yeah,
Do you know which songs? So yeah,
yeah.
when we
We can
go
go
down the
through it
list,
now,
yeah, let's.
track by track. But also, just to mention, one of the earlier suggestions as well, when they were saying it's going to be 6 covers and 6 original songs, the times they are changing. That was decided very early on as well. That is one of the songs they would cover, and I think that the rest of it they decided as it went on. But yeah, let's dive into it track by track.
Yep. So firstly, like I would say that I've sort of uh, you know like categorized it into feelings and the
Hmm.
meanings of the
Yeah.
lyrics. So I don't know. I might mix them up while I'm talking.
Hmm. That's fine.
But
Yeah.
yeah, let's start with "You Can Tell the World," and
Can't tell the
that's a
world about
I
this.
think that's a very good song for starting out duo to sort of also tell the world that they're there.
Hmm.
Along with that, just
Yeah. So
say like the all the happiness that they
yeah.
sort of really put into the song.
Hmm. Yeah, so this one is actually, so this one is their version of like a gospel song that
Hmm.
existed beforehand. But yeah, it's very high energy, and also like their harmonizing, singing style. It really does fit like a gospel sort of song really
True.
well. But yeah, I mean, I made a point that I enjoy this song, but I've been listening to this song as like the first thing in the morning, and it really gets you up and going in the morning. If you wake up and you play this track, it's so high
True.
energy, but it's not loud, but it's
I
high
would.
energy and um, yeah,
Yeah, I would. Yeah, good. I have an early day tomorrow. I will
yeah.
try
Play this in the morning. Also, one thing I don't know if you noticed, but this is actually quite prevalent in a lot of their songs. That
that.
it starts at a specific tempo, but as the song goes on, the tempo also speeds up, and you don't really notice this unless you sort of play the song back immediately as it ends. You can tell that difference. That wait, the song was a bit faster when it ended, but they do speed up that
Hmm.
tempo compared to the tempo they start with, which again gives it that sort of like live folk performance feeling. The tempo sort of varies as they're singing and playing along. Like it brings that folkness of their sound, that folk rock sound.
True. I mean, yeah, that does cover the music part of it, and I
Yeah.
I just think every time I heard it over and over, I just felt what a happy song.
Yeah.
Every time it's just what a happy song. It's like uh, uh you know trying to show someone, or at the time show the generals and admirals that there is so much happiness, so there is
Hmm.
that way out as well.
Hmm.
Because this is the year of Vietnam War, and yeah, so I just think it's a good song that
Yeah.
also follows into the next song where it's about last
Last
night I had the
night I
strangest dream,
had the
Hmm.
which is
strangest dream.
which is just like you know it's another Imagine, maybe
Yeah, so
John
this
Lennon's
this
Imagine.
yeah, yeah. That's the vibes I got as well from the
Yeah.
lyrics as well. So
Yeah.
this was originally written by Ed McCurdy, I think a year back or 2 years back.
Hmm.
And yeah,
All right.
this song was also written during that era, that Vietnam War,
Hmm.
and it was sort of very anti-war and from the lyrics. But so McCurdy actually knew Simon and Garfunkel from beforehand, and I think that's
Right.
how they ended up coming to that sort of agreement of like actually doing their own version of this song. But yeah, I know it's a really nice song. It does remind me of Imagine a little bit, the way it's sort of there's that dream,
Yeah,
right?
last night I had this strangest dream, and people were, living peacefully,
Yeah, they
happily.
agreed to stop all the wars. Yeah, and then the banjo in the background is so nice as well. It feels so unique, played by again Simon. It really, again, it takes the sound. It takes the song, but it makes it unique in respect to the other songs in
Because
the album
yeah,
with that banjo.
true.
Uh,
I think that banjo was added, like I was talking about the nuances. That's one of the
yeah,
nuance that, adding that banjo was or is the actual classical American folk rock
yeah, yeah.
that
It gives it that
that
feeling,
they
right?
sort of put
Yeah.
in. So, it's quite It stands out, as you said, it stands out
Yeah.
of the entire list of tracks that we have
Mhm.
because all songs go in a different zone, while this one puts you in a historic sort of phase. But I think, yeah, we'll get to that. There is another song that we'll come to that.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, let's move to the next track, which is Bleecker Street.
It covers
And
Bleecker Street,
it's
fills the
so do you know Bleecker Street is an actual street in Greenwich Village, New York,
Yeah, New York. Yeah.
named on the Bleeckers who owned a farm in the 1800s, I think.
Yeah, it's quite a history to that.
And so and so this song made that street so famous that they sing $30 pays your rent, which
Yeah.
also sort of gives you a glimpse into the economy at the time.
Yeah. So
And
interestingly, the $30 line. So I mean, this song itself, it's sort of I'd say almost like a melancholic, but nostalgic ode to like New York City. But some of the writing in it, it's literal, but there's a lot of parallels and like symbolism going on. And specifically, the $30 pays your rent. I remember reading somewhere that the one of the sort of I can't remember if it was Simon or Garfunkel in one of the interviews, but they mentioned like Judas's betrayal of Christ for like 30 pieces of silver. So there's a lot of like parallels and symbolism going throughout. Like I'm not smart enough to
yeah,
decipher all of them, but it's really a complex work of writing. And this is an original song written by Simon.
yeah.
It really has that complex writing style. That there's a literal meaning, but there's symbolism throughout it.
And I think now that you're saying symbolism, I think
Yeah.
that's what also um, there are a few songs which have these, I would say, bars or sections which sort of place you right into the song
Hmm.
visually. For
Yeah.
example, this one, it's like you find yourself on Baker Street because you know things about it.
Yeah.
Like a local would. You know things about it similarly, and um, when I did not, well, when I did not have any background on it, so I thought $30 pays your rent could also mean for the you know refugee camps and
Hmm.
stuff,
Yeah.
because
Yeah. I mean, I'm
that
sure
would
there's a
also
lot
make
of like
sense.
parallels packed in that, writing.
I mean, he did write on facts,
Yeah.
so that's a fact.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think then so I've got this Paul Simon who wrote the song has said that it is more representative of the New York folk sound of the times than of his particular talents.
Hmm.
He says that while many lesser known songwriters had one or two standout songs, for the most part,
Yeah.
everybody of that period was writing the same thing on the same
Yeah.
theme
Yeah.
because I guess everyone wanted peace.
Yeah.
So that that makes sense. So we then get to Sparrow, and I think this is somewhere where is this Simon's
Yeah, this is
writing?
also written by Simon. But for me, this is one of my favorite songs of the album, Sparrow. It's just
Yeah,
so beautifully written, and also, performed.
true. I think this this sort of introduces to what I read is Paul Simon's favorite theme, which is nature and the circle of life. And yeah, so Sparrow sort of covers a lot of what Simon wanted to talk about or write about. Do you have any fun facts about that?
I don't know facts, but just the song itself, like the content, I just feel it's because like Sparrow in the song is like the outsider who's like traveled far, But what I really like is, because the song kind of tells this story. Like, again, it's like it's got the vibe of like a folk song telling a tale, like a folk tale. And then you got the oak tree, and you got the swan, and you got the golden wheat, and they all sort of give these different reasons. But it's just, I just found it so interesting that they do have different reasons, right? Like the oak tree doesn't want to share. The swan is worried about how it's going to look like, or, feeling embarrassed, or people laughing at it. While the golden wheat is sort of claiming that, it wants to help the swan, but it doesn't have the means to help the sparrow. So I just think like having those different reasons, and they feel again relatable, right? With the golden wheat, like when it claims that it needs all its grains, it's in your life, whenever you've had a moment that you could help someone, or someone asked for help, but you say no because you can always find an excuse to not help someone. Either you're too busy, or you've got something else that's more higher priority. There's always a reason that you can very easily find not to help someone, and I feel like that's what the song sort of reflects that. And in the end, the cherry on top is that in the end, the earth sort of declaring that everyone is equal. From dust were ye made, and dust ye shall be. It's just, it brings it together so well, because like you have people worrying about status, like this one, and it's like at the end of the day, we're all the same. So it just, the writing is again so beautifully done. I'm sure there's many more parallels that people have probably come up with. Maybe even symbolism and so forth, but just looking at it at face value itself is so rich that I'm really captivated by the writing. All the songs that are written by Simon are amazing, especially in this album.
Yeah, I think so. I think in the last 30-40 seconds, there's a guitar strum, and then I think it's talking about flapping its wings, the sparrow flapping its wings, and there's dust that comes, like they sing dust, and the way the music goes, all of them added together, you can sort of picture dust actually flying out. Like there are these parts,
it creates
as I
like
said,
this experience
where they've sort of visualized it in a lyrical, musical, instrumental way, quite well. There are more examples of that will come along.
Yeah.
But there's that part that I really like when it's talking about the sparrow going for a flight, and it flaps its wings, and there's dust flying out, and there's a guitar strum. I think there's one
I'll
part.
go back and listen to it carefully. Yeah. I'll try and notice that.
And as you said, I love that it's nature and cycle of life, and everything's gonna be equal, because it's not we who decides equality. It is what it is, and what it is you will get back to dust.
Yeah.
Now that we talk about dust, it's interesting that I can connect that dust to the dust that the bird also flies with, because they sort of focus on that, or emphasize on that dust. That's interesting. Then we have a blissful Benedictus. Yeah, I mean, I have it written like, what a blessing is Benedictus, because it is a blessing. It's so calming, it's so soothing, and studying in a Christian school, and listening to the chapel choirs and everything, and it just reminded me of something. So I asked my brother, does this song remind you of a gospel or a hymn? That he did send me a reference. I don't have it written down, but then I did check. It's actually from, I think, an 18th or 19th century gospel or hymn.
So originally, it's called I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but it's called a motet, which is sort of like a religious choral composition, and it was originally arranged by Orlando di Lasso. Again, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. So yeah, there is a history to that, and it's interesting. I'm sure Simon or Garfunkel or both of them, they had some sort of history with this song itself. Coming to
Agreed.
how they actually came to choose this. But yeah, one thing I did, you mentioned it being very peaceful as well, and I just love that sort of cello playing like the bass in the background. It just adds to that peacefulness, and again, it makes this song sort of stand apart from the other ones. That addition of the
Sure.
cello, it really gives it that bass. It makes it really feel unique.
It's also, the way they break the word Benedictus, which is a
Yeah,
blessing, which means a blessing, and
yeah,
um, you know, the in different what do we say? There's a music term, tones, tunes, pitches, or
yeah, yeah,
like every segment is in a different pitch, and it
yeah, yeah.
it's so harmonizing with the obviously. With both of them singing together, it's also a good harmony. But you
Yeah,
know, the way they break it up, and it makes sense because it's a good blessing.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So Benedictus, which is a blessing, leads us to what I would say a blessing in music to us, which I
Yeah.
mean, people who know, right?
Hmm.
It's the sounds of silence, and
In restless
it's
dreams I
Yeah.
walked
it's
alone,
amazing. So
narrow streets of
I got to
cobblestone.
know the existence of the acoustic version back when I watched Watchmen,
I
because
see.
they
Yeah.
use the drums,
Original version.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was just searching, and then I saw, okay, there's one Watchmen version, Watchmen OST, and
Yeah.
then there's one
Yeah.
this Wednesday 3 a.m.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I just listened to the Wednesday 3 a.m. and then that was it. In the beginning, it used to feel a lot blank because I
Yeah.
was
Because you're
used
used
to,
to
yeah,
listening
I
the
was
redubbed
used to
version.
the other
Yeah.
one, and I
Yeah.
was always wondering whether they remixed it or they didn't, or never got
What
into
was?
it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I'm happy to figure that out after, since whenever Watchmen released.
Yeah. Well, this was for me. This was, I think, the first Simon and Garfunkel song I'd heard, but I had actually heard this before Watchmen. One of the teachers at the school recommended I listen to it, and so I went back, and I think it was the redubbed version I listened first. But I did find the original acoustic version shortly after that, and I mean both of them I used to listen. I'd say equally split, depending on the mood. But that was my introduction to like Simon and Garfunkel's music, and I think for a lot of people that might have been the case.
Yeah, it was for me. It was
You
this
know,
and Mrs. Robinson that were my first
Mrs.
Simon and
Robinson, yeah,
Garfunkel. So, so I
hmm,
got introduced to some, I mean, um, I'm saying I had already been listening to Sounds of Silence before Watchmen. But Watchmen sort of, because the movie gave me goosebumps, and, it's a good movie.
yeah,
And
yeah,
just listening to the song sort of put me in the zone of the movie. And every time, so it was on repeat when Watchmen released, and that's when I
hmm,
started finding out that there's two versions.
yeah.
But now I find
Really
out
got
that
into it.
there were two versions, but and this version failed in front of the other one. But now that I hear it back to back, or heard this one for like a week now, and it it feels more purer. If you know,
Yeah, it's very raw.
it, it's in its original Simon and Garfunkel sound, I would say.
Hmm. Yeah,
And but I mean, it still holds because I was discussing it with someone. It it was never the music. Like I told someone else this fact recently,
yeah,
and she had she was listening to it, and she's like, no, this sounds very empty.
Mhm.
So I felt okay. So I guess that's grown on me because I have
Yeah.
attached myself to the words, to the lyrics,
Yeah.
and what they sing, what they're trying to say, and I can
Yeah.
hear it in two different mindsets, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, it is, it is much less sort of your pop mainstream sounding, right? This original version.
Hmm.
Um, but again, it's just so beautifully written and so jam packed with, symbolism or parallels and meanings that I'm sure, a lot of people can listen to it and find their own sort of interpretation of it. But just, I think on the face of it, really, it's about people being unable to communicate. Just going on with their own lives, but there's not a lot of communication going on. But you could say like a part of it sort of feels almost like it's about like awakening or like enlightenment. When he sees like 10,000 other people who are stuck in that same silence that he was stuck in, where he's now privy to understanding that everyone is stuck in that. But
It's
yeah, I mean,
I think it's
each verse itself has like so many meanings that you can get into.
I mean it's an inception of an idea which you can't hold on to.
Hmm.
I don't know if that's making sense. It's that you get to know of an idea that there's a sound of silence as
Yeah.
well, or that there's a meaning to the sound of silence, but you can't
Hmm.
really place your finger on it because it's the sound of silence. So there's like I mean, it's an oxymoron, I would say, I
It's
guess.
elusive, yeah.
So, um, I mean, it's it's very philosophical. I mean, it's always been mind wobbling for me. It's been a crazy ride
Yeah.
listening to Sound of Silence. Every time,
Yeah.
I wanted to sort of chill and be in my zone and or maybe go
Yeah.
to a zone. This is the song that I always reached out to.
It's interesting you say that. Yeah, I mean, even for me, this is kind of like it's weird. It's kind of like a comfort song.
Yeah.
Like if you're not feeling well or it's not like the song itself is like depressing or very melancholic, even though it is, slower and more like the themes I'd say are darker themes.
Yeah.
But for some reason, it feels comforting and reassuring just listening to that song. However bad of a mood you might be in or whatever's happening, it just feels reassuring. And you like I said, every time you listen to it, or depending what mood you're in, you get different insights.
Yeah.
Like the line where the words of the prophets are written on the subway walls and tenement halls. And of course, lots of people like interpret it in different ways. But the way I see it, at least this past week when I'd been re-listening to it, is again the song feels like it's about people being unable to communicate, and it again feels like like graffitis. Like the truth is out there on the walls of subway,
Hmm.
of the graffitis and all the stuff where people have written messages or they've written some sort of truth, but it gets ignored. But we don't say that stuff that's usually written in graffiti. That's the real truth out there. People don't communicate like that. So it just feels very much about that type of everyone being sort of stuck in their own lives, but not really opening up their perspective to understanding other people. We're all trapped in the sounds of silence, essentially.
True. True. So every time you hear the song, it's a lot like, there's a, as you said, a newer meaning that you were finding. And at the time that it was released, I think it might have been a little difficult for people to accept that there could be, you know, prophets who write on the subway walls.
Words of the prophets
I
are
I
mean, I
mean, I'm
think
just,
still that would be difficult for people to accept. Yeah.
okay.
But it was very deep. Yeah, it was a very deep song, and I think it kind of flew under the radar a little bit, or maybe it didn't reach the right people who would have appreciated it initially. But I mean, there was a reason, right, that why it did start showing up on the radio plays, and then
Mhm.
the producer decided to like redub it and also rename it to removing the S from sounds.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think initially it did fly under the radar, like the rest of the album. I think it just didn't get the right exposure it needed to reach the amount of people to really appreciate what the song is and what a lot of the songs are on the track on this album.
True. Yeah, but Sounds of Silence is it will always be a musical gem. You know, like
Yeah,
it'll
yeah,
always be something that I would you know, yeah, listening to any other songs or being in any other zone.
yeah,
This is a zone that I know that I would want to get into sometime, and that would be on repeat.
yeah. And yeah, and through this song at least, I think Simon and Garfunkel's voices are embedded in the zeitgeist. This specifically this song I think is just
Yeah,
so iconic, in a sense.
yeah,
It turned into, Watchmen used it, and then a lot of movies have used it. Then it sort of turned into a meme for a little bit. Arrested Development did a few bits on it, and then it got picked up by the pop culture. It sort of resurfaced again, so it's in the zeitgeist twice. Originally as The Sound of Silence, the song, but now this other whole joke that people sort of, like a meme. It's been used.
yeah,
It's sort of really been embedded twice.
yeah.
Once by the internet now. So it's
Yeah.
it's
Just Ben Affleck.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
Yeah, so Sounds of Silence. Sounds of Silence, to get back on it. Sounds of Silence is the original name, The Sounds of Silence. And
yeah,
then it was redubbed and re-released, which was then called The Sound of Silence. And yeah, so that then moves us to the next track, which is He Was My Brother. And it's a track of loss, they're just singing of
yeah,
loss of something, losing something closest to anyone. And here
yeah,
they're denoting brother. It could be, any member of the family, because those are the
yeah,
ones who closest to you. I would say brother. I mean, having an experience in that, I would
yeah,
agree with it, because you sort of there's this unknowing bond that will always remain with a brother, and the
yeah,
loss of a brother would really, really be hard on anyone.
yeah,
And it's I think it's just about the martyrs who lost their lives fighting for the right
yeah.
cause.
Exactly.
And they were fighting to not fight. That makes sense, right? And
Freedom Riders. Yeah,
so I think they also mentioned sing that, but that
yeah, yeah,
something similar to that. And
yeah,
so there's this nuance, where they sort of pull the, or like take aim while they're singing they, and then they pull the trigger when they're like, shut my brother dead. So
yeah, yeah.
that
There's like
part,
that pause,
so that's
and
that
it
that
hits
felt like a
hard.
gunfire, like an actual gun, like
Yeah,
they sort of,
even though it's just singing. Yeah,
they're just singing it, and pulling that they, stretching it, and then pausing, and the gunfire, and that this,
yeah,
yeah, I think the first few times it actually gave me goosebumps, and every time
yeah,
that was the part that stood out every time, and it was
yeah,
you, like again you got a
yeah,
visual feeling of what they were saying through their
yeah.
instruments, lyrics, and stuff.
And this one again is an original song written by Simon. And they dedicated this song to Andrew Goodman, who was sort of a friend and classmate of theirs, and a civil rights activist. And he died in 1964. He was abducted and killed. It was part of like a lot of like murders of Cheney, Goodman, and Schwerner, I think it's pronounced. I'm not sure. But interestingly, so the song was actually written before this incident, and it goes back to it was written in a more general term about like you mentioned all the sort of martyrs and people fighting for the cause to not fight in a sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was written in that sense. But then that incident happened, and the song was released after the incident, so it was kind of dedicated to him afterwards. And interestingly, they re-released this song later on, and they actually changed some of the lyrics to actually apply to this particular incident. So, instead of singing "this town," they say "Mississippi" is one example. But they switched out some of the words for it to actually be dedicated to Andrew Goodman. But it was written originally as a more sort of general song about all the sort of brothers fighting, even in a sense, so that their brothers could be free.
Because
So,
yeah, at the time, in the Vietnam War and everything, it was, you know, the I think once you turned 18 or 17, you had to join the army, and I
get
think
drafted,
yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, it would make sense. And again, these guys are just
Yeah.
talking about peace. They're just talking
Yeah.
about letting peace happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then we've got the next track, which is Peggy O or Peggy O.
Yeah.
It's it's I will just first leave you with the first impression that I got was it's for the prettiest girl alive.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So I mean, this song is actually based off a Scottish folk song.
okay.
So it's again one of those, like, they've taken a folk song and they've put their own sort of spin to it.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's sort of this. I guess the literal story is the captain of a troop sort of falling in love with Peggy O, who is, like you said, the most beautiful girl. And sort of he's sort of daydreaming that they're gonna run away together.
Yeah.
But I don't know. But then the last verse, it kind of jumps to if I ever return, all your cities I will burn. So clearly someone is like heartbroken. It didn't go in the way they thought
Yeah.
it would.
Yeah.
But the song does jump to it. So the first time I was listening to it, I was like, did I miss a verse in there? Like there was this sudden shift in tone.
Mhm.
And then when I listened again, I was like, okay, so I guess things didn't go quite the way the captain thought it would go. And so, that's this sort of warning. But it's interesting how they chose that, like a random sort of Scottish folk song ends up on this album.
And it genuinely feels like a very good love song, and it's like a very genuine, heartfelt songwriting, I would say,
Yeah.
for the prettiest girl alive. And
Yeah.
I've noted this one point down, which is that I appreciate them a lot for using, that she was brushing her yellow hair
Yeah.
instead
Yeah.
of like a blonde hair. It was
So
yellow
I'd
hair.
imagine that comes from the original folk song. But I haven't actually heard the original version, so I don't know what changes they might have made. But some of the words and some of the sort of lyrics or whatever the chosen words are, I'd imagine they are inspired or they come from that original Peggy O folk song, the Scottish folk song.
It was, I mean, as a fan of lyrics, it was just very interesting to see, yellow hair being
Yeah.
used somewhere instead of the general, maybe soft hair, silky
Blonde.
hair, and blonde hair.
Yeah.
And, it just, there's a list that goes on that's been used and reused, but I think this is the first time I heard yellow hair. That was interesting.
Hmm.
And then we've got the next track, which is Go Tell It on the Mountains. And he's literally just, going on the mountain and
Yeah.
just singing along. It's like I just got this vision of a Pied Piper. The Pied Piper
Yeah.
with the, the, height and singing,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
he's just sort of like people are just following him,
Shouting.
and go tell them.
Nice.
So
Yeah.
that goes very well.
Yeah, so this is again based off a another like existing like spiritual song,
Hmm.
but I was looking at it. So apparently the original is actually considered a Christmas carol as well. So I'd imagine it was one of the more famous songs that they would have heard perhaps, um, or carols, and they sort of turned it into their they put their own spin on it. But yeah, this is like the third I would say like explicitly religious song on the album, right?
Yeah, and
Yeah,
so
like Benedictus, and then You Can Tell the World, and then this one.
without knowing the history, the what my first feeling was that maybe it's related to you know Jesus and Moses or something, because you know
Yeah.
going on the mountains and talking about these
Hmm.
peaceful things, these positive
Yeah.
things, and
Yeah.
blessing people, just sort of spreading or
Hmm.
showering blessings
Yeah.
everywhere.
Well, you were right. Yeah. Yeah. That is sort of what the song is.
And yeah, so that then the next we've got is The Sun is Burning.
The
And that's a
sun is burning in
a
the
sunshine,
sky.
sunny day song on a summer day. How
Hmm.
perfectly things can happen, but also, I mean, I've been confused. Maybe you can guide
Yeah.
me. But
Yeah.
what if sun is like the light which you see uh, out of an explosion?
That's what it is. So I mean, it's another sort of anti-war type song.
It
But this
is,
is
yeah.
actually originally written by a British folk performer Ian Campbell in
Hmm.
'63. So it was like a year before they released it. But yeah, I mean, at the end, it is like the sun, the mushroom cloud that they mention,
Yeah,
like nuclear
yeah,
explosion, nuclear war. But it's interesting because I think you can draw different parallels. So like I think the more obvious way that you could see it is that like the sun, the sun represents nuclear weapons, and that you think they'll keep you safe. Like the people in the park, and the sun is bringing the warmth. Because at the time as well, nuclear weapons were shown as like this is a deterrent. This is a way
yeah,
for us to be safe. And right before the whole Cold War.
yeah,
So this is kind of saying that, oh yeah, it's people are playing in the park and it's all nice, and then eventually as the verses go, the sun comes down and everyone dies. And I think the other way that I sort of see it as well, is sun. You could take sun to be the passing of time, like the sun
yeah.
going down, and basically what they're saying is the fact that these nuclear weapons exist is just a matter of time that someone gets trigger happy
And
and
your
causes
windows and doors
devastation.
will shake.
So it's just a passing. This yeah. So it's you could take the sun to be the passing of time,
Mm.
instead of an actual nuclear weapon. But in the end, the nuclear weapon does go off,
Yeah.
and you got the mushroom cloud of death. All is darkness, anger, pain, and fear. The sun has disappeared.
And the
So
way they perfectly describe this you know this sort of ideal of the optimal a society can be in
yeah,
terms of happiness. That there's
yeah,
the sun going down, there's
but
children playing, and the
yeah,
sun is going
they
down
they
now, so
create
it's
this
time to
beautiful
go back home.
scenery.
And yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
It's a scenery.
yeah,
And
and then suddenly you get that twist of the mushroom cloud of death. So it kind of
yeah,
wakes you up a little bit.
so I mean, it's a again, it's this you said is a song by Campbell.
A British folk performer.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ian Campbell. But yeah, it's yeah, I think this song and Sparrow were two songs that I went back and listened to quite a lot,
Hmm.
trying to because I mean, the message is there, but I think it's just so beautifully put, and the way they also sing in that like sweet voice, and then you have
Yeah.
something dark happening, like in this one. I think it just really, it's quite captivating. So I found myself coming back to this song quite a lot.
Yeah. The second last song, which is "The Times Are a Changing," and it's a way of saying that the next generation or the generation to come is going to act differently, or maybe it's to inspire the next generation to not listen to their elders who have been only instigating war in people
Yeah.
and in the world.
What
Um,
about people being stuck in their own times? Like this is how we do things,
yeah,
and then oftentimes you don't get innovation then, or you don't get improvement of any kind in society.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, I'd say this is one of the, like, because I haven't heard all the other covers. I haven't really heard the originals, but this one I have heard, the Bob Dylan version. And I think this version is actually quite similar to the Bob Dylan version. I think the main addition really are the harmonies, and then like the lack of the mouth organ. Or I think it was that the Bob Dylan version had. But I was surprised by how similar it is to the original one. Obviously, with slightly their twist of how they harmonize and vocalize. But what you were saying, the themes are very evergreen that this song has.
yeah.
Um, and I'm sure one day when we'll do Bob Dylan, we can dive really deep into it as well about how it came about and everything. But yeah, what you were saying, times are always changing and people are always resisting change, and I think that's really
I think this is
what the song is
it's
about.
also like it carries a hope,
Yeah,
right? It's got this hope in it that there will be better times, there will be
yeah,
better reforms or reformations, and yeah, it captures the generation gap maybe quite quite essentially,
yeah,
and at quite an early age for the kind of songwriting.
yeah,
Along with obviously I mean we will get into Bob Dylan when we get into Bob Dylan.
yeah.
And yeah, so we now have the last song, which is the album Wednesday
I can
morning
hear
3
Title of
the
the
a.m.
album.
soft
Yeah.
breathing of the girl
Do you
that I
want to start this?
love.
Yeah. So this is again an original song written by Simon, and really this song it's kind of just about, I'd say, like regret and like consequences of a decision you've made. Like the main character in the song is not looking forward to tomorrow morning. He
Right.
knows he has to leave his loved ones. He did something bad, he did something wrong. So I mean that the face value of the song is it's about a character who was it robbed a liquor store, and now tomorrow he has to run away,
Yeah.
leaving his life behind. But the writing again is so well done. Like I've written down this part, my life seems unreal, my crime and illusion, a scene badly written in which I must play. And it's just so poetically written. And it really reminds you of, like All the World's a Stage line by Shakespeare.
Yeah.
But like a scene badly written in which I must play. And sometimes you do get in certain situations in life where things spun out of control and you're trying to identify where did it all go wrong almost, what led me down this path to do this. And I think the song sort of plays on that a little bit. Wednesday morning 3 a.m., when you can't sleep, you're up at 3 a.m.
In the
and your
middle of the
brain is
week.
just like, exactly, and
Yeah.
your brain is just like, I did something really bad, or you're feeling that regret or that guilt, or you're
True.
scared of the consequences, and you're trying to question yourself, like, how did I get here, in a way, or like how things just, it seems unreal sometimes, when when you're going through that. And I think that's what this song really captures, apart from just what it has on face value.
True.
Right.
And it's a good song to end with as well. Uh,
Yeah,
sort of taking all the songs, combining them all together, and
yeah.
maybe just sort of you know r-
The album like starts very happy and positive, but it kind of ends on a bit more sort of a melancholic note of like regret and consequences, which is quite interesting.
which is and then
Yeah,
it sort of you know but it ends with regrets and consequences, so which is fine for the album that we are going for, because
yeah,
that's how you get or be regretful, because You did something and you were happy
Yeah.
doing that, and well,
Hmm.
you've got
Yeah.
you've got a lot more shit being thrown at you.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just,
Exactly.
and again, it's good to end it with, the album, the name of the album. So it covers the
Yeah.
essence of it.
Yeah.
Um, and you sort of get reminded again, okay,
Yeah.
this can happen, or this is a thought process that could happen to
Yeah.
anyone, or, something
Yeah,
like
and I
that.
mean, like, if you think about the songs in general, right? Like, especially the ones that were sort of written by Simon, like Bleecker Street, Sparrow, The Sound of Silence, all of these songs, they really fit that theme of Wednesday morning 3 a.m. because they're all very like existential in a way, and there are things that, again, when you're not able to go to sleep and it's 3 a.m.,
Yeah.
though these are the sort of things you're sometimes thinking about, right? So
Yeah.
it really does fit in with that theme of Wednesday morning 3 a.m. Like that's the best time to listen to this album in a sense, especially the originally written songs by Simon. They really feel like that it's that type of like existential thinking going on, which is maybe why they named the album as they did, you know.
Maybe he just wrote all these songs actually at 3 a.m.
Right.
Never know.
Yeah.
I mean, he could have, or maybe he just
Yeah.
started like week to week and,
Yeah.
Wednesday to Wednesday.
Well, I know for some of the songs, I mean, now that we're sort of in the more sort of summary section of
Yeah.
our discussion, I know that there's, for example, with The Sound of Silence, there's a lot of disagreement over when it was written, because I think Simon told one story, and then Garfunkel told some other story. And so there's not a general consensus of when that song was actually written by Simon, which I thought was quite interesting. The different people having the different stories of how the song's written.
Uh,
Um,
share the story.
Well, I think Simon said something along the lines that he wrote it when he was quite young in like the shower. He used to like singing in the bathroom because of the, tiling, the echo effect you get, like an echo chamber. And I think he just got his guitar or something in the bathroom and he just wrote it. When he was like really young. And I think the interviewer even asked Simon, but how does I can't remember if it was 22 or 23, but the interviewer was like, how does a 22-year-old say these words that are there in The Sound of Silence? And he said, I don't know, they just came to me. But when they asked Garfunkel, he was like, no, it was just written in 1963 or something like that, or 1964. He was like, no, we just wrote it over 2 nights and I don't know what that's about. So it's interesting that they have those different stories. And it could be that because I just read, I don't know the context of the interview or if there's like an actual audio video recording. Maybe they were being playful. Or maybe there is some, ambiguity in how it was written. But yeah, but I would say again, The Sounds of Silence is probably the highlight of this album.
Yeah.
It's really what I think launched them into the mainstream, especially the redub version that came later on. But even this original version, I think it's
This original version
the
is like,
highlight.
so if you say Sound of Silence, the Sound of Silence is something that sort of captures a lot of emotions and in a sort of more trendy way. So
Yeah.
this is just like a more purer form of energy, which
It's like when artists release like the demo version of the song.
yeah, and
So that's what this version feels. If you say The Sound of Silence that came later, the redub version was like the actual released version. This version kind of feels like the demo version before that one was released. Without the drums and without all the electric
yeah.
instruments and stuff. It's got that feeling to it, that raw feeling.
And I mean, it never felt bad listening, or felt, as people mentioned,
Lacking,
empty, or there's
yeah,
something missing over here. Because
yeah,
if you originally, well, maybe I don't know if Simon Garfunkel would have gotten their fame if they hadn't gotten Sound of Silence released.
yeah.
Because
I mean, that's really what pushed. Their producer doing that was really what pushed them, I think, to
yeah,
the mainstream.
because
But also just pulling focus back a little.
Mhm.
I think just the album in general. I think it's just very interesting. I mean, you got the sounds of silence, but just the themes around like you've got war, protest, death, change, and it's just even the sounds of silence. It's about like I said, it's about people being unable to communicate. But that's one of the main reasons for, you could argue for war even.
Yeah.
Like two sides not being able to communicate properly or come to an agreement.
Yeah.
That just results in violence. So the way they picked the songs and the way they covered the songs, it's very interesting. But a lot of these themes are very evergreen, you know.
True. And even though times are a changing, um, it's
Yeah.
like these. So there are parts. There's one song which was, hmm, which one was that? Second, there are songs which felt so uh, so authentic folk music that it reminded me of this the Renaissance period in
Hmm.
like in the Italian thing, and I think it was Assassin's Creed 2. Have
Yeah.
you played Assassin's Creed 2 or like
Briefly, but I haven't played
so
all the way
that so
through.
you can when you're in the open
I
world you
played the
can
first
walk
one all the
around
way through. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
there are these people with the banjos.
Imbecile.
That's in one.
Right.
So in the
Oh,
second
that's in
one,
one. It's an imbecile. Look at that guy. What is he doing? Something like that, right?
but, in this, like
Yeah.
there are people who want you to throw money at them.
Okay.
So they're street performers. So they'll just come in front
Yeah.
of you and they'll start playing the
I
banjo.
see.
And that sort of,
Yeah.
I mean, if that's
That music,
historically
that sound.
correct,
Yeah.
then it does sound a lot like Simon and Garfunkel
I
or
see what you mean.
taken from Simon and
Yeah.
Garfunkel.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess that's the folk type. That's the folk and the folk rock, if you will, in Simon
True.
and Garfunkel as well, right? Like the music that even they've been inspired from come from those folk tales that may not necessarily originated in the U.S. all the time, right?
Yeah.
They might have a deeper history. So yeah, I think it's interesting, but very unique. I think this album, it was a commercial failure, but it still is a very good introduction to Simon and Garfunkel's music and their sort of style. And the songs they pick to cover and the gospels and everything, it really, it fits their harmonizing vocal
Yeah.
style so well, and they really deliver on that. And every song, again, like I said, it's still kind of unique. It doesn't blend together as the same type of song, so it's very interestingly arranged.
Yeah. True. And
Right.
I also this this sort of set a sort of theme to that era for me. I mean, I did note tidbits from here and there, and
Yeah.
so because the Doors also formed during this period, and
Yeah.
so I got into
Hmm.
that, and there's Floyd, and
Yeah.
people. There are
Yeah.
musicians talking about the same thing, but this
Yeah.
sort of defined it as a, as I mentioned in one of the songs, like a local, like a local's
Yeah.
perspective on what's happening and what
Hmm.
they would want to happen, what they would not want to
Yeah.
happen, and you know,
Yeah.
and incidents like they shot my brother dead.
Yeah.
So those attachments that were there at the time is what I could
Yeah.
really understand and say
Hmm.
empathize with over here.
Yeah.
So this, I guess, that covers the first album by Tom and Jerry.
The dynamic duo, Simon and Garfunkel. Yeah.
And it's a great album, it's a great listen, and it's a great read if anyone's
Yeah.
interested. And yeah, so that covers it. So we will see you with something completely new, hopefully, or maybe just something that uh, we we would just love to listen to. And if you've got any suggestions of what we should listen to, please do comment. And yeah, do you have any closing thoughts?
No, I think we covered it. You covered it quite well. Yeah, I'm ready for jumping into the next album for our video next week.
See you next week.
Oh, well, مثلا ده راست قلب بسته ودسمه
I will mention my favorites after we're done with the last one, which
Yeah.
is
Mhm.
The Times Are Changing.
Well, there's one more after that, but yeah, the second last one.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
Is there one more after that?
Yeah, Wednesday morning, 3 a.m. The main song.
I don't have that written down. I think it's also it has this you know uh, I zoned out.
Yeah.
Silence.
क्यों?
It
कैसे
just
क्या?
crashed.
15 पे हो ना? Beta. चलो, at least the Zoom recording is there.
हाँ, Zoom recording is there. हाँ, हो
Yeah.
तो जाता है. So
So do you want
yeah,
to redo that
yeah.
part? Second last song.